Hello, everybody. My name is Pablo Boczkowski. I'm a faculty member at Northwestern University and director of the Center for Latinx Digital Media. Thank you so much for joining us for today's weekly virtual seminar of the Center. It's really a pleasure to have you with us. The mission of the Center is to create knowledge about digital media in Latinx and Latin American communities across the Americas. Today's speaker is a leading scholar in this space. Ingrid Bachmann is an associate professor in the School of Communications at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. Diego Gómez Sara, a postdoctoral associate at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern and a faculty affiliate at the Center for Latinx Digital Media, will introduce Ingrid in just a minute. I am delighted to know that this quarter, our series is co-sponsored by the Alice Kaplan Institute for the Humanities, the Bachlet Institute for Global Affairs, the Center for Global Culture and Communication, the Department of Communication Studies, the Department of Radio, Television and Film, and the Latino Studies program. But before we go into the seminar, I would like to start by acknowledging that Northwestern is a community of learners situated within a network of historical and contemporary relationships with Native American tribes, communities, parents, students, and alumni. It is also in close proximity to an urban Native American community in Chicago and near several tribes in the Midwest. The Northwestern campus sits on the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Ottawa, as well as the Menominee, Miami, and Ho-Chunk nations. It was also a site of trade, travel, gathering, and healing for more than a dozen other native tribes, and is still home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois. It is within Northwestern's responsibility as an academic institution to disseminate knowledge about Native peoples and the institution's history with them. Consistent with the university's commitment to diversity and inclusion, Northwestern works toward building relationships with Native American communities through academic pursuits, partnerships, historical recognitions, community service, and enrollment efforts. Let me say briefly a little bit more about how the seminar will unfold. First, Diego will tell us more about Ingrid's research and career in just a minute. Then Ingrid will deliver her seminar. After that, we will open for questions. Please feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A function of the webinar at any point in time. Diego will read them aloud and moderate. At the end, we will deliver some closing remarks. Once again, many thanks for joining us. And without further ado, Diego, the screen is all yours.
Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce to Professor Ingrid Bachmann. Ingrid Bachmann is an associate professor and former director of the School of Journalism at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. She is currently serving as a co-chair of the International Communication Association's 72nd Conference Theme Committee. She started her career as a reporter at one of the most important Chilean newspapers, El Mercurio, in 2000. Then she continued her career as general editor of the Vice President Communication Office at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile from 2001 to 2006. In that final year, she decided to start a new journey in the United States, obtaining her PhD in journalism at University of Texas at Austin in 2011. Professor Bachmann wants to understand the complex relationship between gender and media. She was a pioneer in studying gender inequalities in news production, coverage, and interpretation. Her work disentangles the multiple challenges that women struggle in the world of journalism. Through feminist theoretical perspectives, Professor Bachmann has examined and studied several cases at this intersection of gender and communication, in particular, cases from the Global South. She continues her academic career at the School of Communication at Católica. During these years, she became a leader in gender, political communication, and language research. Her work provides new insights and a better understanding on the intersection of women, news narratives, and politics. Moreover, she is a multi-method scholar who relies on quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. Her work has been granted with more than 6 national research grants. She has published more than 30 papers in prestigious journals, such as Communication Research, Feminist Media Studies, International Journal of Communication, Journalism and Mass Communication Quarterly, Journalism Studies, Women's Studies in Communication, and Digital Journalism. She is also a leader in our community. She provides her time and energy to build a stronger and more connected community. She became the chair of the journalism department in 2017 at Católica. And also she was the chair of the Feminist Scholarship Division of the International Communication Association. Finally, I must say how supportive she has been with scholars, especially those who are starting their careers. She has mentored graduate and undergraduate students for several years, guided those who wanted to start academic careers, and helped them to succeed in these research journeys. So please join me in welcoming Professor Ingrid Bachmann. The screen is all yours.
Thank you, Diego, for that presentation. Thank you, Pablo, Mora, and the Center for Latin Digital Media for inviting me for this thing. I'm actually quite excited. When I was invited to present in this seminar, I thought that rather than presenting a specific study, although I will present some of my own findings, I would address a topic that is very dear to me, that I think is very relevant to be explored and examined from the Global South and in Latin America in particular. It's a line of inquiry that I've been pursuing for the last 15 or so years, probably, but it's one that I kind of stumbled upon when I started my PhD. I didn't think I would do something on gender or feminist theory or anything like that. It just happened to be. And it has become a passion. I really love this topic, and it has to do with the fact that the relationship between gender and news is a very complex one. And let me show you some numbers about those things. So we don't know that there had been inroads, and I want to address that. There were gender equality, but the main thing is that women and women's issues still struggle to have equal footing in the world of journalism. We have gaps when it comes to representation. We have gaps when it comes to news use. We have gaps when it comes to understanding what news means, and even the industry does not treat women in the same way that they treat their male professionals. And just as a recommendation, if you want to read a very thorough study about these inequalities worldwide, I would recommend this book edited by Cynthia Carter, Lydia Steiner, and Stuart Allen. So let's see those different issues or topics that make that the relationship between gender, and I will mostly focus on women when I talk about gender, and that's part of the conversation, and news. First of all, and we know this very well, and it has been consistently so, that women don't make the news. I mean, women don't matter for those who actually write the news, or they don't appear in the news, they don't exist, they are quite invisible. So, for example, in Chile, and this is data, quite recent data from the Global Media Monitoring Project, women account for about a third of the sources in mainstream news and about a quarter of sources in internet news. And of course, women made 50% of the population. So there's something there to start wondering about. The numbers are quite similar worldwide. And because the Global Media Monitoring Project has been doing this analysis every 5 years for the last 25 years, actually the numbers know that progress is quite slow on this regard. My own research shows that women are way more likely to appear as accident or disaster victims. Usually they are mentioned without an occupation. They are like your regular citizen or just a person like, I don't know, on the street or something like that. They don't appear as experts or as people that know about their things or that are even perhaps protagonists of a news story. And they are way more likely than men to appear as just regular citizens, sometimes even without a name. It's just like person on the street or something like that, which is quite something. These numbers are so bad, actually, that the Global Media Monitoring Project says that if all things remain the same at this rate, it will take 67 years to close the gap. 67 years to close the gap. So, I mean, we're moving into the next century to try to see whether these things will change just naturally or at the rate that they've been improving lately. And this is often the case in my own research as well with TV news, or at least mainstream news and newspapers, that women often appear just as an illustration of a popular opinion. So do you think Alexis Sanchez should play on the national team the next week? Yes or no? Those are more likely to have women to appear saying those kind of things, or just a personal experience. Oh, I was one of the persons affected by, I don't know, the lack of vaccines available in this or this other center, of those kind of things. But they don't appear as experts. They don't appear as protagonists of the stories. They don't appear as people who matter, I will say. So that's quite a message that they are sending. And if these pandemic times have shown us something, is that things were quite worse because of COVID. The whole coronavirus situation actually has stressed how pervasive different discrimination systems are, and actual coverage about the pandemics has showed that women are even more invisible on this story. So they are less often sources or protagonists of the story, so they appear way, way, way less, and that is problematic. It's something that we should care about. It's something that we should worry about, and it's something that we should fix, and or at least do something about it. And I kind of stumbled on this topic when I started doing my PhD in Texas several years ago, when I realized that indeed coverage in news media is often sexist, with the stereotypes, and that ends up reinforcing patriarchy. Take, for example, the case of what I did this is in 2006, Chile had its first women president, Michelle Bachelet. And I did a study about how she was covered her first few months in office, what is usually called the honeymoon period with any new president, and I compared with the past presidents. What I found is that indeed coverage was sexist. What happens? For example, her competence was questioned since day one, like, oh, this person, does she know what she's doing? Is she knowledgeable about international affairs, about how to conduct a country, how to rule? She's kind of soft-spoken. Does she have what it takes to be president? It's like, she was already elected. I mean, it didn't really matter if she had what it takes to be president, she was the president, period. And if you compare that with the coverage that past presidents, male ones, had received, her coverage was consistently more negative. I mean, even like the gaffes or the mistakes that could have happened or any kind of situation, she was more penalized than past presidents. And while I cannot prove that it has to do with gender, I will say that when you see this with gender lenses, you realize that it's kind of consistent and persistent, and it happens a lot. And indeed, she was subject to a very gender-specific scrutiny. Comments saying like, I don't know, that international affairs was not the same as having tea with your friends. It's like, seriously, those kind of comments? Or, oh, she's a mother, so she should know about this or this other situation, how important it was for families. Like, okay, her predecessors were parents too, but you don't see those kind of comments. A lot of fixation about, for example, her appearances, her wardrobe, those kind of things. So it struck me because I had never realized how this is quite often, not only with Michelle Bachelet, but with a lot of women and politics in particular, but usually with women in the public sphere. And I hadn't realized, I hadn't noticed, and then is when I got obsessed with this matter and started to explore these issues. My second beef, I will say, in the relationship between news and gender has to do with women are, for the most part, less engaged in news. They are less likely to be news consumer. They are less intense news users when they usually declare to be less interested in news. And even they go to the extent to say that they avoid the news to a larger extent than men, for example. And this is international evidence, and that includes Chile. I mean, there are well-known gender gaps in news use in countries as different as Germany, Taiwan, the US, and Chile as well. I mean, women do engage less with the news, especially mainstream news. There were some expectations that digital media will make things easier for women to like sort certain barriers to get to the news and maybe be more comfortable. It's more flexible with your time and all that. But we also know that indeed women and men do not use digital news media the same way. The kind of content they prefer, how intense they are, or even how they report their self-efficacy in terms of whether they will be able to find something or whether they can make the time to do to follow the news or to be up to date or things like that. And what I said, this is not only with news, like traditional news in terms of, okay, this is what happened today. This is the main events of, I don't know, in the world or in the country or in the city today, but actually with all kinds of engagement metrics. I'm talking about commenting online. I'm talking about sharing news. I'm talking about posting about news in social media, talking about discussion and all that. And this, again, is pervasive all over the world, and Chile is no exception about that. Our own research, for example, with colleagues here at Católica, shows that Chile is not an exception in terms of women being less intense users of traditional media. And this is from a survey, panel survey we did a couple of years ago. Indeed, like women tend to consume more television, and this is also matters because, okay, it's television, they do consume more TV news, but the problem with that is that usually television news tend to be more soft news or softer, let's say, or it's not as profound in terms of coverage, at least in Chile, and there are issues, so it's kind of a light kind of content, and that makes things harder. And when you consider all the other, at least legacy media or more traditional spaces, indeed, women are less likely to actually follow the news regularly, which I think is a sign. And there's evidence that it happens the same with digital media. But, and that is the caveat that I will point out, is that we found that when it comes to talking about news in different platforms that are not usually considering for news use, such as WhatsApp, which is very popular in Chile, and other social media, women actually report to be more engaged in news use through this platform. So I think there's something to explore here. I think there's something important and relevant to address here, but I will go back to this in a few slides down the road because I wanted to make this point. So I think there's something here that we should be exploring, because what is it about this that women apparently engage more with news in WhatsApp? Because when you think about it, WhatsApp is not a platform made with the intention to sharing news, traditional news at least, or like public affair news, those kind of things. Like, yeah, you could share about how you're doing with your friends, with your peers, but it's not something that you will like discuss about, say, politics normally, or it's not the main takeaway of that app. But there's something, so I think there's something to explore here, and actually we've been exploring that with some colleagues here at Católica. The third thing that I want to stress is that when you think about it, news is a male construct. It's how we define news is a very male-oriented, male-hegemonic way of understanding what is important, what is relevant, the public sphere. Women historically have been relegated to the private domain, matters regarding what we call the 4 Fs, family, fashion, furnishings, and food. And those are supposedly women's issues or women's interest, which says that the bulk of the news is properly male, is masculine. It has to do with that. Even the whole idea of objective or neutrality in the news is a very masculine way of understanding how you can approach things. So there is that. So when you think about it, pretty much what we understand as news content, and check any newspaper, TV newscast, even I don't know, a newsletter that you get now, is that kind of content is very tied to the political and economic interests of men. Matters that had to do with public affairs, with big politics, with big stuff, and not necessarily the very domestic concern that sometimes women have. And no wonder what is deemed either issues related to women or that had to do or that impact women more profoundly are usually less prominent in news content, to the extent that they are sometimes relegated to women's pages or soft news, those kind of things. So it's not the main bulk of the public sphere. This is not relevant. It's left out. And in that sense, this is a very pervasive message sent from media to users that pretty much tell you, you don't matter, what concerns you is not important. And when I said that coverage about the pandemic has an underrepresentation of women, I'm talking about this as well, because women have been very affected by the pandemic as well, but their stories are not being told, how they're dealing with lockdowns, with domestic violence, with matters of losing employment, which at least, for example, in Chile was way greater among women than among men. So there are all those issues. So actually, several feminist scholars say that instead of mainstream news, we should talk about male stream news, because it's the way that males understand what's relevant and what is being presented. And it's pretty much presented as a professional value and is but pretty much news is defined in terms that are convenient to men, and that's obviously favoring patriarchy and even the very same socioeconomic paradigm that often marginalizes women, that put them like on the sidelines as they are not relevant, they don't matter, it's not our concerns, stuff like that. No wonder again that gender-related issues are usually less prominent in news media. They have increased. They have there has been progress, and I want to say that, but it's slow. And again, at this rate, we probably will have to wait until next century to actually see some better numbers about the things that I'm going to present. So for example, and again, the Global Media Monitoring Project shows that news around the world, this is a study with 147, if I remember correctly, countries in the world. Only 7% of stories referred to gender equality rights, just mention it somehow. Only 4% challenge gender stereotypes, and 6% race and actually talk seriously about issues of gender inequality. And the numbers in Chile are quite similar, are pretty much the same. It's 6, 4, and 6. I'm talking about matters of, for example, gender violence, of rapes or rape myths, for example, how the media coverage rape and sexual assault is unbelievable. It is very believable. It's unacceptable, probably, in terms of putting the blame on women, addressing this as a problem of individuals instead of a problem of a society, matters of discrimination, matters of access to education, matters of economic discrimination, like access to jobs, to situations, childcare, which is so deemed a feminine affair, and all those things are usually not addressed to the extent I think they should be in media, because they are important matters. They affect a ton of people, but they are not being actually addressed in the news. So no wonder you have then people that, women who don't engage with the news. First, they don't see themselves in the news, and the stuff that concerns them is invisible as well. So what incentives do they have to actually follow the news? Other than, this idea that a good citizen is a well-informed citizen. I don't see many incentives they don't recognize. And because of that, I think it's quite relevant and actually been studied that as well, why many people have gone to, for example, social media, and for example, Twitter, to create kind of an alternative a public sphere to discuss these issues. These are an example of a hashtag that became viral, Viajo Sola, I Travel Alone, about actually 2 Argentinian women who were assaulted and killed in Ecuador. In one of the explanations of one of the police officers covering this story had to do with what you were expecting. They were traveling alone. Again, 2 women. Apparently, when they travel together, they are alone. And what I saw is that on Twitter, a lot of users went to contest those narratives, those media messages saying like, okay, this was a problem of women. What were they doing traveling alone? They shouldn't have accepted the invitation to get on that car, stuff like that. And what they were starting to say on Twitter, and I'm going to translate them here, has to do with, this is not a problem of traveling alone. The problem is not them. The guilty part is the person who did it, not the victim. This is about teenagers being, and they were teens. This is about young people being at risk. The emphasis should be, and this is a problem of society. Women are at risk. Women are not protected enough, and there should be different narratives to address and to fix these issues, but they're not doing it. And what I found is that in this study that pretty much users were very adamant about the discourse has to change, but the media apparently are not listening. And I think that is quite telling of how the media are relating to certain topics as well, but it's also is very revealing of their attitude and how they normalize things. They perpetuate these messages saying how we should understand matters of, again, gender violence, assault, discrimination, sexism. And but I think that while social media or digital media in general has not been this great or such a great opportunity for giving everybody equal access to have a voice as it was kind of predicted or hoped for in the early 2000s, I will say that it's giving room to this kind of alternative discourses. And actually, I've seen a lot of organizing and activism related to these issues that is being arranged via social media with context. I'm talking about Viajo Sola, but for example, the Ni Una Menos movement, Not One Less movement in Latin America is very prevalent this way, and it has come and it has served to highlight issues that were quite invisible in traditional media, that were not talked about, and they have actually made very relevant a problem that is way more pervasive that people seem to think back in the day. The other beef that I have with the news industry and in this relationship with gender and news has to do with how women as professionals are treated in the news industry. For the last at least 20 years, pretty much worldwide, or at least in Western countries, that's the data that I have, journalism schools graduate more women than men, period. And that's been the case in Chile as well. My own school of journalism has been the case for the last at least 30 years, more women graduate than men. And when you see the newsrooms, you see that they often are way more male-oriented and have way more men than women, which is where are women going? And it has to do with newsrooms are not that welcoming to women for several things. I mean, the hours are crazy. The topics they are considered that they are good to cover are not necessarily considered that important. There are several problems that I think we should address and explore more. But there are several signs that we should be considering and worrying about these things. And it's not only a matter of an offer or a supply of people who could serve on these jobs. It's also a matter of demand and giving them the opportunity. So there is ample evidence worldwide that women are underrepresented as professionals in the news industry, as reporters, as photographers, as editors, as directors, as even like owners of media. And there's also evidence that when you have women in the newsroom, they make a difference. So it is important to have them there, not because just because they're women. This is not about having a check your diversity list or I don't know, think you're done with your required diversity guidelines. This is about having different points of view, different perspectives, but also using valued professionals and value them. I mean, they are important, they are relevant, they do a good job, and recognizing that. In the case of Chile, the research that we've been doing shows that women account for about 40% of newsroom professionals. I'm talking of legacy media, pretty much. But they only are a handful of editors of leadership posts. And there's something important about that. So they start as reporters, then sometimes move a little bit, but they hit the glass ceiling pretty early and pretty often. And actually that's frustrates them. And then they leave the newsroom and move to other jobs because they see that there are not opportunities for them. So again, the industry is actually missing out on very good professionals, and they are missing a very important aggregated value, I will say, in their personnel. That said, we've been seeing in the last 5 or so years, I've seen this trend in Latin America, but in Chile in particular, that women have made important roads in digital native platforms. They are creating new outlets. They are trying to do entrepreneurship stuff. They are way more active, for example, in several initiatives about cross-border journalism, where they collaborate with people in, say, Peru, Bolivia, and Chile to address migration patterns, or Brazil, Argentina, and Chile to see matters of, for example, human trafficking, or about drug trafficking, or, for example, the Odebrecht case in Brazil, and all these very pretty much financial matters that go beyond certain borders. And also several independent startups are led by women in Chile. I'm thinking of even my own students, and you cannot tell how proud I am of them. They are like, okay, I don't like the news outlets that we have. They don't cover the news that they should. We have created our own thing, and we're using the tools that we have to do that. And they are, I mean, as is usually the case with the startups, not all of them are successful, but I will stress that they try, and some of them are actually successful. They are sustainable. So that is important to address, that they are actually leading in innovation when it comes to news work. And I think that is important as well. That said, and I'm actually kind of scared about that, I'm seeing a lot of reports about women journalists in different countries, but in Chile in particular, which is where I'm closer, that women are being, that in the last 2 years, that they're being increasingly harassed, attacked, even doxxed. This is when they reveal your private information, like your email, your phone, or your actual address, in a very gender-specific type of violence. People being attacked because the story they did on a certain politician, revealing that, I don't know, they had something wrong, or they, I don't know, had corruption cases, stuff like that, and they go for the women reporter doing that. Even when there is a team of, say, reporters, they go for the woman under that story, and they attack them very violently, very aggressively, as this tweet here mentions, how this specific person, Leslie Ayala from La Tercera newspaper, how she received rape threats, like calls for her to better kill herself for those stories. I mean, who does that? And who has to accept working in those conditions? And I'm seriously like very worried that maybe in just a few semesters, I have to actually start teaching my students how to protect themselves against these kind of situations. I already teach them how to protect themselves, their privacy, several things, but do I have to, in addition, to teach them how to deal with trolls, and with sometimes more than trolls? And it's something that worries me. It's something that usually is not addressed in the news industry seriously, and I think we should address it more seriously, because it has important consequences beyond just, oh, this is violence. No, this has very important consequences. You're actually marginalizing women farther out from their jobs, their situation, but you're putting them at risk, and I think nobody deserves that. I say all of this, and now I come back to why this is such a dear matter to me, is because all these gaps that I've shown you have important implications. It says a very clear picture, at least to me. One, and I think that I should stress this every time I can, is that the news industry is not serving women well, period. I mean, the news industry is very lacking when it comes to how they treat women in the news industry, by the news industry, in news content, in all things related to women. The news industry is doing very, very bad. No wonder women are like opting out, or like they don't choose the news and all that. But on the second level, there's a normative aspect, and it has to do with, we've always said that news use, news consumption, knowing about the news, being interested about the news is one of the main resources for public and civic life. This whole idea that you have to be a an informed citizen to be a good citizen. Like, you have to know about what the stuff, and I'm not talking about like civic in terms of, okay, when is the election, but what are the candidates about? What are they saying? How you are supposed to do this or that? So when women report being less engaged with the news, I think that it's also a message for society. There's something going wrong here, or there's something that we should address as more important that, oh, just women are as interested in news, or women prefer these kind of stories than these other ones. No, we should explore this and take this more seriously, because it has important implications, actually. So on that regard, do you remember when I showed you that slide with that graph saying that women tend to use WhatsApp for news way more often? And actually, we've seen that in several contexts, regional, national, international, that women are more intense users of social media, period, and mobile instant messages as well. But research that actually, for example, this is a colleague of mine, Sebastián Valenzuela, here at Católica, have been doing, shows that people who uses WhatsApp for certain uses, for example, for talking about the news, actually end up learning about the news and has political conversation. They actually discuss with their peers about the news, which is supposedly, at least theoretically, one of the main resources to actually know about your stuff, to be involved in politics. So when you discuss about it, when you get cross-cutting conversations, when you actually address these issues, you learn about politics, you are interested about politics, and you get involved about politics. And when you think about it, so we know that WhatsApp can lead to political participation, or at least to political outcomes. We know that WhatsApp is quite popular among women. So do women gain something by using WhatsApp? And that's what I've been exploring lately. This is based on a two-wave panel survey on news use. So what I want to stress is has to do with what kind of social media people, they say they use, just regular use, but also for news, and the changes that we have. And of course, like you can say that you can see women actually use WhatsApp more often than men, and they actually say they use Facebook more often than men in general. But I'm more interested in the gains. So yeah, WhatsApp is very popular in Chile. It has increased for men, but for women as well. And WhatsApp use for news also has increased, and between wave 1 and wave 2 for men and women. This is 2000, if I remember correctly, the year 2000, it was pre-pandemic, 2016, 2018, I will say. I might be wrong with those years, but it was pre-pandemic for sure. And women, which already were heavy users of WhatsApp, became more intense users of WhatsApp. But what I want to stress is this, is that they usually reported on wave 1 to be less involved in WhatsApp news use. But by the time of the second wave, they actually were on equal footing that men, which is something interesting. So they kind of closed the gap in terms of yes, use. But more importantly, is on the outcomes. And this is what I want to stress. So, for example, if in wave 1, men knew more about politics than women, this is your usual survey asking about whether they know, I don't know, who is the Minister of Economy, or what party is promoting this or that legislation, those kind of questions. And this is actually a worldwide situation. Women usually report to be less knowledgeable about public affairs than men. That happens all the time. And when you see that they actually are less frequent news users, it's not really surprising. But what I want to stress is this. So if in wave 1, the gap was pretty much a whole point, it actually closed for the second. And if you see the gains between, in the case of men, between one wave and the other, between men and between women, that's the part that I think is interesting, and we should be exploring more. What is it about WhatsApp use that apparently leads women to learn about the news more than they use with other apparently media? Political discussion also increased among women between one wave and the other. It has to do with this was right before a presidential election. I'm sorry, I missed one. And what I want to say with this is that what you have here is that there are political outcomes of people using certain platform for news. So we should explore more about that. What is it about news? What is it about WhatsApp? What is it about news over WhatsApp that apparently women are, if not officially learning more about the news, at least better recalling information that they found. And they report also discussing more. So I think that's something interesting that we should explore more. When you talk about the news industry that don't usually follow how people talk about their stuff on, say, for example, WhatsApp. And when we ask them what kind of stuff they actually share, what they deem news, it's all kinds of things. It's Twitter post, is actual mainstream media news, it's actually comments from other people, but they actually engage. And when you think about it, people on WhatsApp, your contacts are based on your cell phone number, something that you don't give to everybody. So it's not just your regular conversation. And actually, informally, like anecdotal data, talking to women, they tell me that they prefer WhatsApp to talk about news or to discuss certain topic over, say, Facebook or Twitter, because they feel more comfortable doing it there. They don't get as many trolls or people attacking them or people mansplaining them or any kind of situation like, oh, you just shut up, like you just sit down and be pretty in your corner, those kind of messages, because they do get those kind of messages. They actually feel way more comfortable. So it's apparently a space where you can actually discuss as you are supposed to discuss about politics, with people getting different points of view, like pondering about issues, learning about what others are saying, and maybe giving food for thought for politics. So I will say that so far what we've seen is that what women share on WhatsApp actually matters for their news knowledge, matters for the political participation. So we should be exploring more on this. And I'm actually doing that, but I don't have results yet. And it's very important to see what WhatsApp, or maybe it's the next platform that comes after that. What is it that when you have certain discussion networks on WhatsApp that you end up learning, that you get getting involved, that it actually leads to political activism? People who are more frequent users of WhatsApp actually reporting being more politically active in terms of going to the streets, protesting, and those kind of things. And I think that's important because these political discussions, the ones that we saw that were increasing over one wave to the other to a greater extent among women than with men, the results show that actually that led to more likelihood to at least have the intention to vote in the presidential election. Chile still has a voluntary vote. It used to have a mandatory vote. They are suggesting to change that. It hasn't been done yet. But women historically have been left out of politics. And this is perhaps a path to more participation, to news gains, to knowledge. And I think that's relevant to study, to explore. I think this is also relevant why we should do this kind of research in countries like Chile or any other in the global south, because probably how WhatsApp is used in Chile has a lot to do with, yes, it is very popular, but it also has to do with, for example, it's pretty much free in all data plans. I mean, data plans have free uses over WhatsApp, so people can use it even when they don't have money on them. So there is all of that, and I think it's very relevant to explore the context that they share. And I've been seeing lately more research on WhatsApp. We probably should do more, and I also think that we should do more on WhatsApp and gender on this regard. When I started my presentation, and I'm starting to wrap up now, the title of my presentation was Framed by Gender. And I said framed by gender because my own research has been framed by the idea of gender, but I think that gender itself is very relevant because everything, in my view, is framed by gender. I mean, how women live their experiences, they live their lives, and all matters of gender inequality has to do with how gender is presented, for example, in the news. And I do think that a feminist theory lens is the most appropriate way to do it, because I believe in gender equality. I think it's necessary, so I fight for that. And in 2021, sexism remains alive and well. So the fight against sexism should be alive and well. It is, but I think it should be deemed as relevant, important, meaningful as it should be. And why framed by gender? And my main takeaway on these 15 years doing this kind of research is because gender always matters. And with that, I am done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a fascinating talk, and what a way to start our fall seminar. Thank you very much, Professor Bachmann. I want to invite all the public. We have a great attendance today. And to submit their questions, you can send your questions to the Q&A feature that you will see on the bottom, Q&A. You can write your questions. Either Professor Bachmann and I can see them, so I will just read them a little bit, and then Professor Bachmann can also go through those, and in order like we can answer all your questions, okay? So before we will give you some minutes, we already have some questions here, but I am curious and of course like challenged. I'm a male, I'm a man, and of course it's so hard for us just like to be in your shoes. And in that sense, I was thinking a lot about the results for your last study about the WhatsApp. And we know that there are a lot of inequalities, not only in news, and we see this in politics and in power. And I'm thinking about if what WhatsApp is doing is just like destroying those barriers about access, knowledge or information access. Like for so many years, women were denied of having, for example, to study, go to college, just like I have more information or discuss of those topics. And for a reason, I believe like at the end, news, politics, all of those are very tangled and connected. So I would like to know more about like if at the end, it's not just the platform itself, it's just like the social media platforms are providing more access to knowledge, to information. And that was very clear because that gap that happened before the pandemic and after the pandemic, like we're right now just like everyone in the same place from home. So if it's something related to destroying those barriers of knowledge and information that could make a difference.
I mean, it could make a difference. I don't know how big or how permanent is one of the issues that we have with all this liquid kind of media that you don't know where it comes, where it comes from, where it goes, or how it will change. At the moment, the picture that I have is this, is that apparently it is a source for this. It's not an intended one. I mean, it's not that WhatsApp was made to discuss the news, or at least I will say other platforms were more purposeful on that regard, like, oh, discuss matters. Twitter is about discussing, supposedly, but WhatsApp is private by default. I mean, they have that message that these messages are encrypted. We know now that they are not that private as we thought, but it's a circle. I would say it's a safe environment. And I think that's quite telling in the case of women, because the ones that I've been talking informally, this is anecdotal data, not actual empirical research, but they tell me that they feel safer, they feel more comfortable, they actually can explain what they do, they can engage, they can agree to disagree with other people without being attacked. And I think that tone is very telling of their experiences with other platforms or with just being engaged in politics and other matters. And it has to do with centuries of women being marginalized. I mean, 100 years ago, we couldn't even vote because we were deemed not smart enough or too emotional to make a rational decision about who should lead the country. And that's insane, but it's not that far ago.
Right. Like even like 6 decades ago or even more. Like, yeah. No, I'm quite excited about that result in particular. And my last question, because you said like probably women feel more secure, like more safe there. It's also because they're sharing or commenting news also with other women, or is something like it doesn't matter? Like for example, if there's certain homophily effect there.
No, they usually. Most of their networks are family, which is all kinds of gender. They use friends, which is usually all kinds of gender, although some of them do report they have my female friends. It's a separate chat of everybody and all that, but the point is what they are sharing. And for example, the research with Sebastián Valenzuela suggests that people, and this happened with men and women, but they share personal stuff on WhatsApp, but they also share political stuff. Oh, look what is in the news, or they comment, for example, we had a presidential debate here in Chile yesterday. I was commenting on WhatsApp with my friends and we were doing like, did you see that, your reaction? And I was following on Twitter as well, but like multi-platform and several screens, of course, but it's that whole experience of I get to discuss, to ponder, to think about those issues. And in some cases, even to have cross-cutting conversations. They did say, women, that they tend to, the ones that I've been talking to, they say that they have to block some people sometimes. They have, or they have chosen to, I don't know, leave a chat group specifically if they don't like it and all that. But even in those cases, it's in a safer environment that they see in other places. They actually mention Facebook as a very toxic place to do these kind of things.
Thank you for answering my questions. So let's start with the public questions. We have right now we have two. I will start with Maria Celeste Wagner. I will just read a little bit. You Professor, you also can read it there. Maria Celeste says, thank you so much, Dr. Bachmann, for presenting this very important and pressing research. I have one question. What do you think about what I understand as a tension between, one, giving women in media the right to communicate their concerns about gender inequality, and at the same time, acknowledging that male journalists, communicators, are also essential in promoting gender equality? In other words, what do you think should be the role of men in communication leadership positions in media today and promoting gender equality?
I mean, this cannot be just a fight made by women. That is totally unfair because they already are at disadvantage and they cannot fix everything themselves. We need allies, and more than allies, I think that what we need to understand is that a gender approach or a gendered lens has to be mainstreamed on itself. It has to be one of the ways that we understand. I mean, we are learning more now about, say, the importance of being of diversity, of the importance of certain topics, and those have to concern men as well. And when I talk about gender, yes, I paid more attention myself on women, but gender has to do with all genders. So it's not only these two options. It's not either a binary situation. So we have to address in a more, I would say, this is a fight that everybody has to do, because I mean, gender equality won't happen just with a switch on-off kind of situation. So we have to work on that. And for that, everybody has to work on that. I think otherwise it won't work. I mean, it won't just trickle down because women are doing awesome and these other people are not doing that great. That it doesn't work that way, because that way it won't last pretty much.
That's true. The second question that we have is from Miriam Hernandez, and her question is, WhatsApp news consumption is also related to misinformation. What kind of engagement can be born from that? How can future studies account for that?
It's funny because the studies that I've seen on WhatsApp sometimes in other countries focus a lot on misinformation. And in my experience, yes, you do get misinformation. I haven't seen anything on the scale of misinformation over WhatsApp in Chile. And we've asked users about misinformation and as well. And they actually said that some of the discussions they have is about misinformation. Like people like, no, that's not true. This is the correction. Or have you see this fact checker say this or that, or just some people we've seen also that they confuse misinformation with parodies. And so there is a, no, that's not true. No, I know that is not true. It's a joke. It's a meme. So we've seen that, and I think that we have to do a more nuanced assessment of those things. It's a very good question, because when we devised this original study, we didn't consider that. We just asked people, oh, do you talk to you about this? And separately, we asked them about seeing misinformation, but we didn't even ask about specific platforms. So it would be interesting to see how people consider misinformation, what they consider misinformation. What I would say is that on a separate study, and where we actually explore misinformation, what we see is that over the years, people have learned to be more skeptical about what they see. I mean, if it's suspicious, I don't know, maybe we should check, we should consider. And there was probably has to do with the social outbreak in Chile in 2019, when there was a lot of misinformation, was like the feast of misinformation going every day. And people, I guess that they learned to be less credible, or at least to be more skeptical about certain things before, I don't know, forwarding certain details or just checking other stuff. But I do think that we should explore those, I mean, those relationships in a more refined way that we've been doing so far. It is, let's say that that's for future research.
Great. We have a third question from Mora Matasi. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Bachmann, for this incredible presentation. It's also a truly concerning, deeply concerning presentation. I have two questions, and please feel free to decide whichever feels more relevant. The first question is whether you think there's a significant correlation between the political world, the world of politics, especially in Latin American countries, being overrepresented by men, or where it's a world in which women are significantly underrepresented, and how that unfolds in media. Is there a correlation between the world of politics and the world of media? That's my first question. And then I have another question which is unrelated. About what you said on WhatsApp, women feeling like they can, women feeling that they can communicate and learn about news and discuss news and get informed through WhatsApp. I was just listening yesterday to a presentation by Professor Eugenia Milchestein on the issue of disinformation. And she was saying how there's this idea, very sexist idea, about older women on WhatsApp being the ones that spread fake news. And I couldn't help but connecting these two statements, right? The idea that you're seeing that women are actually informing themselves and discussing news and talking about news and learning stuff. And then these other discourses by which women are represented as being the ones that spread fake news, right, via WhatsApp. So again, I wonder whether you see a relation between these two things. And my other question was the relation between the world of politics and the world of media. Thank you so much.
I will say, with regards to women and older women being misinformation spreaders, it has to do more than anything, at least for what I've seen, with stereotypes. I mean, it's a condescending way of understanding how women and older women deal with news, with information, even with like platforms, with using cell phones, like how they understand. They don't know. It's a way to treat them as they were children. And that's actually quite often when you talk about women and older women in general. At least in the research that we've done in Chile, is everybody is a potential spreader, and it's actually what we've seen is that people that actually acknowledges that they actually have done it either knowingly or unknowingly share misinformation. We've seen that there's not like a clear makeup. It's all kinds of people, older, younger, women, men, from the left, from the right. It has to do with other things usually. So maybe for certain stories, it would be older women, but for others, probably not. I would say that has to do with that. And when it comes to the whole politics and representation, you could say that to a certain point, it has to do with, okay, all the main newsmakers are male, and you will think that that's why they are in the news. But you know, when you are dressed in other countries where they have great female representation in politics, and the numbers are still pretty bad. I'm talking about, for example, Nordic countries. Who, I mean, in the Nordic countries, you have a very good, at least parliamentarian representation of women, and they necessarily are in the news. Or in the case of Chile, I think it was, if I remember correctly, the year 2017. I might be wrong, but the president was female. The president of the Senate was female, and the main leader of the student movement that was actually on the news every single day was a female. And still the numbers were, sources are overwhelmingly male. It will seem that women don't know about economy because they are never an expert source on matters of economy or defense or international affairs. Women are asked about childcare, about, I don't know, the cost of a gallon of milk, and that's it. And I will say, so yeah, on one hand, you will say, oh, because of the pool of potential sources are mostly male, but not, but because even when there are way more women, there is still underrepresented in the news anyway.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. This was a fascinating, as Mora said, concerning seminar in terms of its content, but the quality and the delivery were absolutely impeccable. So thank you very much. Couldn't think of a better way to kick off this second season of the Latinx Digital Media Seminar. Thank you, Diego, for your always excellent moderation, to the audience for staying with us through the end. And I invite everybody to join us again on next Thursday at noon, for our next seminar with Matías Todel from Universidad de la República in Uruguay. And hope you have a great rest of your days and week.